in the field, or specifically wicketkeeper Sam Billings, had a solid day. But if we listen in here, I think most of his contributions were vocal. And thankfully, due to stump mics, we can listen into a few of them now.
Hey, bowling. Straight to you, Creepy Crawley. Come on, boys, eh? We go bang, bang here, eh? Card looks a lot different here. Come on. 175 all out, boys. Why not, eh?
175 all out, boys. Why not, eh?
Has he not watched any of the other test matches?
But I feel like that's been a thing that's almost been missing a little bit from England. I think they do seem a little bit quiet and subdued. Whereas every time you see anything, when the Australians put on pressure, you've got Marnus and Nathan Lyon like shouting at the batter non-stop. It's quite nice to see a bit of something.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because it is something that happened during the 2017-18 series. I think midway through, a few new players were around the squad, maybe not officially part of it, but around it. Mark Wood was one of them. And I suppose people made the point that having those new people in who are a bit fresher and also a bit more upbeat, especially when you're being hammered, it does lift the mood a bit. And I suppose Billings in this case is that player, being drafted in for this last test. And I mean, he just loves it. People who know him will say that he's just constantly, maybe to a fault, over enthusiastic. But I suppose the counter is to Jos Buttler, who by the end of it was wearing his own personal woes and the team's woes to such an extent that it felt like, he just wanted to send him home. And thankfully he is home now. But I suppose it's chalk and cheese, and given how Buttler finished off and Billings just picks up.
Lydia, have you ever had the situation before where someone comes into the squad and replaces someone and just completely changes the mood, or comes in with a mood that just doesn't match? Because like you say, Vish, I imagine a lot of the England guys are thinking, why is he so happy? Why is he doing this? We've already lost the series. Have you ever had someone do that?
Yeah, you get it a lot. I think in this instance, I think it's quite refreshing actually to see Billings like that. I think, in my opinion, I think I don't think we've been as aggressive as we could be in terms of what Billings was doing on what we saw in that video clip, and that can rub off as well. I think Stuart Broad at one point picked the ball up and threw it not at Labuschagne but at the stumps, and I think those sorts of things, once you see someone leading the way doing it, you suddenly think to yourself, okay, yeah, let's have a bit more about us. And it's always hard when you're losing a series, but there's no reason why you can't finish in a way that you might have want to have played. So yeah, I'm all for that with Billings.
He'll definitely get points in terms of saying creepy crawly in Australia as well. If you guys don't know, that's a pool cleaner essentially. So
right,
it's a thing that goes to the bottom and cleans the pool. So creepy crawly is very funny as an Australian.
Do you look at that, having already wrapped up the series comfortably, do you look at that coming from Billings and think, oh, what's he doing? Or do you think, oh yeah, fair play, go for it?
Oh, absolutely go for it. I think if you're coming in to represent your country, you want to do everything you can to make an impact straight away. And if it is being more positive in the field, like changing people's attitudes, whether it be running quicker between the wickets or helping with the bowlers and being more positive, you want that kind of new positivity to be infectious within the group, I would think.
I think
Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, I think the other thing is his story is, people are used to seeing him carry the drinks. He's driven 500 miles from Queensland to get to meet up with the team. And so for him personally, he's going to grab that opportunity with both hands. He knows the wicket-keeping slot is up for grabs. So yeah, good on him, I'd say. Sorry, Vish.
Yeah, no, I was going to say much the same, actually, especially when you consider that England are at a point now where there is a bit of a refresh, and he's basically got a chance to put in the first audition for this new chapter. And I suppose, the wicket-keeping energy, you've got to be the focal point of that energy, and when you see it dipping, you have to be, I suppose, put yourself out there a bit more. So, yeah, I mean, all that was perfectly understandable. And, pre-watershed language as well, which we can all get on board with.
Yeah, he knew what he was doing. Fair play to him. It is good to see that positivity, because when you look at Wood and Woakes today, they were quite expensive. Nothing was going right for them really, and they very much similar to Jos Buttler. It almost looks like they're wearing the series on their shoulders a little bit. Mark Wood, who's bowled arguably consistently the best of all the bowlers, but just can't seem to pick up wickets. And then Woakes, who's had a fairly up and down, mostly on the downside tournament series. It does seem like Fish, you were saying there is a bit of a refresh happening. Do you think Billings is the start of a huge refresh in that team? There's a lot of guys there that we're not going to see again, or do you think it's just a couple of small things?
Yeah, I don't think changes are going to be wholesale because I suppose there never are. You got to remember when England went into this series, barring a few injuries, this was broadly the batting lineup that they, if you looked around the country, this was basically the best of the best, as it were. And now, naturally, along the way, there were a few casualties in Dom Sibley in particular, who was basically earmarked for this series. But broadly, if you look at within county cricket, there are some people who are knocking on the door. I suppose the biggest name, or certainly the name that's been bandied about, is Josh Bohannon at Lancashire, who is a middle order bat primarily. So there actually can't be massive wholesale changes unless the ECB are willing to go through, or I suppose go through a bit more of a dip to refine these players. So, for example, Rory Burns coming back into the side. I think maybe a couple of tests ago, people thought, right, that's the last we're going to see of him in an England shirt. Is that particularly wise? Probably not. He'll certainly get this tour in the Caribbean and perhaps even this English summer to go through. So I suppose in that regard, they're going to have to play it a bit safe. But certainly there should be people outside on the periphery, and also outside the group who see this as an opportunity, yeah.
How long do these sort of scars from these series take to heal?
I mean, yeah, it's been going on for a while now, I think. So I think you have to, I was going to say take the positives, which isn't, I know it's a phrase that people get annoyed with, but I think you have to, after a tour like that where you've been thrashed, you have to try and look at the individuals and say, okay, who's dealt with quite a bad tour pretty well, and take that forward. And then I think in a way you do have to then start to maybe look at other options. So it's not necessarily as much about being scarred from it. I think it's about, okay, well, let's make changes that will hopefully cover the cracks, or not cover them, but address the issues that England have had on this tour. And there's been a few of them, and I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I think, hopefully that will lead to real positive change, not just trying to paper over a few cracks.